Yo, what's up, mountain bikers? Today I want to talk to you about braking in corners. I think braking in corners is not very well understood, and that's because until recently, there's been no way to assess braking in corners other than by watching someone. Now we have real technology to measure that, so what I want to do today is first talk about some of the ways that people think you're braking in corners and think that are faster, and how they don't work. Then I want to talk to you about the 2-1 none braking method, because I think that'll really help you find some speed and flow and have some real good exit speed from the corners. And then I want to show you some real data where I went out and I tested this. So I'll show you my rides with Brake Ace. There are two common methods that I hear about braking in corners. The first one is brake early. The second one is brake late. So braking late is pretty good because you have a lot of speed up until the time that you're braking. Let's say the most maximum speed that you could have because you're not braking. Then once you start braking, you're braking with purpose, and then you get through the corner and you exit with some speed. So late braking usually works pretty good, but the problem is if we leave it too late and we start manipulating which brake we're using, we could change the geometry of the bike and not really have a lot of control as we go through the corner, because we could also end up changing our body position. Now the second one, I don't really like it. Braking early. Braking early means that we brake and then when we get to the turn, we release the brakes. Now this one makes a lot of sense because once you start leaning the bike, you don't have a lot of traction. You're on the corner knobs of your tires. Now if you start braking really hard when you're already leaning the bike, you don't have a lot of traction and there's a potential for losing control. So braking early kind of makes sense. But if you've ever tried braking early, like I have, it doesn't really work because you brake early, you get through the turn, and if the turn has any sort of elevation loss throughout it, like when you're on a downhill, you're going to gain so much speed as you go through that turn. So what ends up happening if you brake early, you release the brakes as you go through the turn and you think you have control, you end up braking real late after the apex of the turn and losing all your speed. And that's one of the most common problems I see with braking early. Now, if you can get through a corner braking early, well, that's really good, but I don't think it happens very often. We ended up talking about some of these at length on Demystifying MTB. I have the link down below. You should check that out. So one of the things that I learned on that podcast is the 2-1 none braking method. Now this method's really good because it allows you to not only brake late, but it also allows you to maintain control as you go through the turn. Now, in a way, I think the 2-1 none title tells all for what you do with the 2-1 none braking method, but let's break it down. So firstly, what you want to do is identify your braking zone. Now this is obviously going to be corner dependent because it's going to depend on what kind of obstacles are in the way and what the traction is. So let's just say you can wait late to brake. Now when you do start braking, you brake with purpose, and that means you're using both brakes very hard. You're digging into the ground to get as much traction as possible, to slow down as quickly as possible. This allows you to leave it super late. Once you achieve a speed that you think is maintainable, you switch from 2 brakes to 1 brake. And when you switch to the 1 brake, it's just the rear. And the good thing about the rear is it can control your speed without changing the geometry of the bike too much. So where you change from 2 brakes to 1 brake kind of depends on the corner as well. You might do this at the apex. You might do this after the apex. It kind of doesn't matter. But what you need to do is you need to try it over and over yourself to see what works best for you. By this point, you're just riding the rear brake and you're looking through the turn and you already know where you're going. This is where you transition to no brakes. That's the none part of the 2-1 none braking method. So again, the pros of the 2-1 none braking method are that you brake with purpose and that you control your speed throughout the turn and you exit with maximal exit speed. Now, exit speed is super key, and there are a lot of people that don't exit with maximal exit speed because they're focused on going into the turn with maximum speed. Now, it kind of doesn't matter how fast you go into a turn. All that matters is how fast you get out of the turn. This is why I would prefer to see riders overbrake as they come into a turn. Let's say you overbrake into a turn and you pretty much come to a stop. Now, if the terrain has any sort of steepness involved with it, you're going to be gaining speed throughout that. Sometimes stopping is actually okay. And this is one of the things that we talk about in the Free Speed ebook. So you can check that out down below. Stopping in the turn means that you can't go any slower coming into it. And if you can't maintain that speed without riding the brakes through it, you need to be careful with how fast you come into a turn. Because you know that if you come in really fast and you need to slow down anyway, you're just going to remove all your exit speed as you get to the exit, which is not going to be ideal for maximal flow. However, if you come into the turn with a lot of speed, take away all that speed and gain control, you'll be able to ride faster and smoother. The beautiful thing about slowing down a lot means you have time to look where you want to go, point the bike in that direction, and get through it as fast as possible. All right, so let's take this example corner. This is a photo taken by my friend Tyler. Photo is a great example of a corner that drops away. It's actually pretty steep. It doesn't look steep here, but you gain so much speed that if you brake early, there's no way you're going to be able to stay off the brakes and exit fast without tapping the brakes unless you're like the sickest rider ever. So you can see here, let's kind of just break down this corner. Totally like a 180 switchback, pretty common place. Well, I guess it's not that common, but you'll see them around, and it's a great place to try the 2-1 braking method. Now you can see here, like we have these braking bumps. You can see where people start braking like really hard, and these develop from kind of like the tire slowing down and just kind of slamming into a hole, and the hole gets bigger, 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 bigger as you drag the tires through it. So I'm coming in, let's say I'm coming in real fast. Where am I going to brake if I brake early? I'm going to brake here and then try and get off the brakes. But since there's so much slope here, you're going to gain so much speed, you're going to want to dab the brakes out here again. So you're going to lose all that speed, and that's a pretty big problem. So if you're going to use the 2-1 non-braking method, you can focus on braking as late as possible. You could even start braking right around here, brake until the apex with both brakes, called braking with purpose. Know why you're braking, and then at this point transition to just the rear brake. So the good thing here is like gravity is going to give you all this speed here. So if you're not dabbing the brakes here and removing all that speed, you're going to exit with quite a bit of speed, and that's great. So, transition, let's say this is the apex, transition to the rear brake here, ride the rear brake until you feel like you can maintain that speed, release the rear brake, transition to none brakes, and then carry on through to the next corner. All right, so let's take a look at a few different braking methods that I used on one corner. So the first one is the 2-1 non-braking method. Now this was actually let me change it here to be satellite. So this was a gravel path heading into a gravel path. So that was pretty good. It was definitely sloping down, like definitely a downhill, gained a lot of speed here, but this one was flat. So I wanted to get all my braking done here to be able to exit with maximum speed. So I wanted to get it done at some point, but there wasn't really a lot of traction. So I needed to be a little bit careful about how I braked. So if you want to check out, actually, I just did a write-up on this using the mobile view of the ride, and that's on brakeace.com, so you can check that out if you want to, but I'll just go through it here, and we can look at a few parts of the app. So this was 2-1 non-braking method. You can see here that I started by applying both brakes at relatively the same time. You can see I was actually a little bit earlier with my rear brake, but so I definitely have some room for improvement there, kind of apply them both at the same time, maybe even brake a little bit harder. But this whole brake event ended up lasting, let's say, 1.5 seconds. So 1.5 seconds of braking. And I braked really hard with a maximum power of 1,073 watts. And then, so that's the 2 part of the braking. And that was early on here. I'll show you that second by second in a bit. And then a transition to just the rear brake as I gained control and maintained control. And then once I realized I was able to exit at that same speed, I released the brake. And you can see I exited at a speed of about 20 kilometers per hour. So that was pretty good. Let's check out, you can see my brake balance actually here. So 70% on the rear. Yep, makes sense. That's total energy. And 30% on the front. So let's have a look actually at brake activity. We can zoom in here and you can have a look. See how that pops up on the left-hand corner? Every 1/10 of a second that's changing. So I'm like pretty even on both brakes for a bit. And then it's just heavier rear. Oh, come on. There we go. About even. It wants to show my key opportunity. Let me just flag that key opportunity and it goes away. There we go. Now we can see it. So pretty even with both brakes until I start to transition to just the rear brake. We're still at 1,000 watts. And then you can see by the time we get to the end here, we're at just the rear brake. So that's pretty cool. And then I exited with about 20 kilometers per hour. If I open up just the brake event info, let's see what the actual event was. Turn off brake activity. So the flow score was 0.9, and I braked for 1.4 seconds. And it was a heavy brake event, so that means I braked hard. I braked with purpose. So now let's check out another one. So now we're looking at early braking. Early braking for me was pretty terrible. I tried to brake real early, much earlier than I did before. You can remember from the last one, I left the braking until about the apex. This one I braked early. Again, I braked really hard, maybe not as hard as I did the last time, potentially because I just didn't have as much speed. Braked hard, took away a lot of speed, down to about 17.5 kilometers per hour at the lowest. But then I gained so much speed that I had to brake again at the apex, and that took away all my speed. So I was exiting, well, right there about 20, but I had a period in there where I was going slower, right? So overall, it was slower because I had this period of low speed before I gained it again and then braked again. So that one wasn't too great. My total brake time for this one ended up being 2.7 seconds. I still had a relatively close flow score of 1.0, but that means I took away more speed because it was higher than when I did the 2-1 none method. Both of these brake events were actually classified as light, so they weren't heavy, which means it wasn't really braking with purpose. So I think what I could have done is instead just maybe braked harder here and then see how much speed I gained. And if I was able to drop this speed lower, maybe would be able to exit with a higher speed. So that's worth trying again. Okay, so this one is my both brakes. I guess I titled it both brakes, but it was basically late braking. And this is probably how I would normally ride a corner like this. Now, don't forget, I had quite a few trials down this turn. I probably did it 20 times by the time I was able to do this super confident method of using both brakes, braking really hard, braking late, and exiting with as much speed as possible. So this is probably why this method worked for me instead of the 2-1 none method. Add to the fact that once I got to this point, it was a flat trail. And I had a lot of practice. So this one worked better in this turn. If it was steeper, I would definitely stick with the 2-1 none braking method. But I ended up braking for 1.3 seconds, with a much slower flow score. So a 0.5 flow score. And I ended up braking pretty evenly with both brakes. So that ended up being a good one for me. I think, obviously, like I said, if it was steeper, I would probably stick with the 2-1 none braking method. Though in this case, I ended up having the highest exit speed at over 23 kilometers per hour. So that worked for me then, but 2-1 none for me has been working really good on most of my rides since then. All right, so there you go. Go try it yourself. We really want to know what you think and what you have to say about using this method. If you want to listen to the podcast, down below in the link in the description. It's also on our website on breakace.com. If you want some sensors for yourself, they're also on breakace.com. All right, thanks for that. Enjoy, and we'll see you next time.